Right. Looks like people are starting to come in. Hi, everybody. We'll just wait for a bit of a critical mass. 27 folks are in, 29. We've got 50 people in right now. We'll just wait a couple more minutes and then
Sure.
kick us
Welcome
off.
everyone who's here already. Hello, hello.
The first couple minutes of this recording will be interesting because we're not saying anything. Okay, so we have 49 people
I
here,
think
so
that's a
do
good
that.
time to go. So, welcome everyone to our amazing Integration Nation presentation. I hope everyone can see the first slide here. We're going to be talking about breaking down silos in fundraising. And welcome everyone here today. We're going to kick off the presentation with a few introductions. My name is Candice Gregoris. I'm a senior account director at Stephen Thomas. I've been here for about 16 years, and I'm really excited to talk in this presentation about integration and what it means to do that practically.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelley Sutherland. I'm a senior direct and digital copywriter with ST and also working with Stella. And I'm also a creative director at Stephen Thomas. And I've been with ST for about 13 years.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Basco. I am the Director of Integrated Campaigns at the Canadian Cancer Society, and it's a pleasure to be part of today's integration webinar and looking forward to speaking to you all. And thanks to Stephen Thomas and the team for the invitation.
Thanks for joining us, David. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm Brian Tenenhouse, Executive Vice President and Chief Creative Officer at Stephen Thomas. I think Candice and I must have started within a week of each other, or at least a month, because I've been there almost 16 years as well. Why don't we jump right in and start with, we'll give you a bit of a line of sight to what's going to happen today. I'm going to give the Integration 101 course in about 10 slides and a bit of historical context. Then David's going to give the perspective from the organizational side of things. How does an organization integrate before they brief any of their agencies? What happens there? And then Shelley is going to share the Holiday Canadian Cancer Society campaign and all the creative that we integrated with CCS's other partners. And then Candice is going to close us out to give, you'll see the creative. Okay, how did you get there? What happened internally? How is the sausage made? So that's what you're going to see today. You can put questions in the chat and we'll probably get there closer to the end. And we also have our email addresses up at the end so that you can send us emails with your questions if you have any, because we've got a pretty jam-packed hour. So we'll jump in right now with a bit of a definition of integration and some historical context. So integration is simply a unified, seamless experience for customers. I'm talking now more from a commercial world experience because that's really where integration started in the commercial world. And you'll see how that developed as I get into the historical context. Next bullet, aligns campaign creative strategy and brand platform across various channels and platforms. I will talk more and define the difference between a campaign, integrated campaign, and an integrated brand platform when I get to that. And then Shelley will be providing an example. as well of both. Ensures that all messaging and communications are consistent while reinforcing the brand's key message. Brand has played a lot more of an important role in the nonprofit sector, and I'll be talking about that as well. So let's give you a little bit of historical context now. Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, because things were very different back in the day. This is really about the 50s and the 60s, 1950s and 60s. Things were more siloed in the commercial world. You had print ads, you had radio ads, you had television. This, by the way, is the very first remote control I ever had. It was a Zenith TV. It was the first color television we had. And the first thing I ever saw was I Dream of Jeannie in color on my TV. And you have outdoor. Then, of course, you've got mail and you've got telephone. All those things were siloed. You'd get a phone call, you'd get an envelope, but nothing really cared about the brand. Nothing really cared about the customer. It was really the company pushing stuff out. So everything was very siloed. Oh, can you go back, Candace? One slide. Everything was very, look at these beautiful silos. We have to give them their moment. So everything in the commercial world was very siloed. Then you can go into the 80s, and that's when brands started to play more of an important role. Things weren't really coming together in an integrated way because there weren't that many channels other than the ones that I've already shown, but brands started to play a more important role. The audience was starting to fragment. So if you go to the next slide, you'll have a little reminder of CNN. That's just an indication that cable started to come in the 80s. So audiences started to get a little more niche. Technology started to play more of a role in our lives with the PC and the Apple computer landing on our desktop. And certainly Microsoft represents the PC side of things as well. Then, as I said, brands started to play more of a role. Companies like Nike, Apple, Coke, name a brand. In the 80s, logos were everywhere. Advertising was king. And other channels were started, these large companies started to care more about where their audiences were interacting with them, right? But then in the 90s, this slide represents the 90s. This is when actually I started working in advertising agencies, and it started to become more important to integrate and to not just be a single channel creative person or a single channel agency. You really started to have to think about how the brand, which had become more important in the 80s and was certainly very important in the 90s, how that played across channels, because if you go to the next slide, the World Wide Web in about 1994, it started to play more of a role, even though it was 1.0. Now you had another tool in the toolbox that you had to start thinking about. But you also were thinking more about your target audience as a company. How are they interacting with you? Where are they interacting with you? And the brand that is now very important is starting to play an incredibly important role, because that brand awareness work that they're doing is starting to play a role where it's connecting donors emotionally. If you have an iPhone, you are loyal to that brand. You are more loyal to the organizations that are putting their messages out there in different channels, because you've got more of an affinity to that brand and the message, the image they're pushing out there. So where is the nonprofit sector today on February 27th, where integration is concerned? I think you can bring that silo back up. Yes, thank you. And I have to say, just hold here for a second. Back in 1994, as I said, we started to see integration playing a bigger role. When I joined ST 16 years ago, ST was only a direct mail shop. That's all we did. We did fundraising through direct mail. So I felt like a little bit like I landed back in 1994, and the sector at large wasn't really very different. The agency was in the same place as the sector. Over the last 16 years, we've had to become more integrated. We are playing in all channels because that's what clients now, especially over the last couple of years, have started to need and want. And we're going to get into the why of that. But it's interesting to me that the nonprofit sector is really just grappling with this. The Canadian Cancer Society, the case you're about to see, is we've been with them for 20 plus years now. It's really only within the last 5 that there's been integration going on. And over the last 2 or 3, where it's really hit critical mass. And you're going to see an example of what that critical mass looks like. So if you go to the next slide, Candace, that's where we're at today. And the sector is coming along for the ride. So that's a really important point to make, that we need to integrate. This presentation is all about making the case for integration. Large organizations are already starting to do it. You see it with sick kids. You see it with heart and stroke, and certainly you're going to see it today with the Canadian Cancer Society. But it's more important than ever that even smaller and medium-sized organizations start doing that as well. You don't have to break the bank. You can just integrate 2 channels. Just be where your donors are. If you go to the next slide. Let's have a little bit of audience participation here. Let's reflect on your organizations. Do your brand, and just throw yes or no answers into the chat if you don't mind. Let's see how honest you'll be about where your organization is. You don't have to name the organization, but just give us some impressions of where you're at. Do your marketing teams, your fundraising teams, your brand fundraising. So I'm seeing a lot of yes, that's great. Yes, but only 2 large annual campaigns. We're getting there though. Yes, yes. Oh, it's good to see. Yes, yes, we have. Annual and quarterly planning. Yes. Okay. So a lot more yes here. That's great. Hi, Marla. Yes. Very good. Sometimes. Okay. That's interesting. Very good. Sometimes. Very good. Okay, good. So I'm glad to see that you folks are here, and this will be a good benchmark to see if you're doing it from a best practices perspective, or if there's more you could be doing. The next question. Do your brand guidelines take fundraising channels into consideration? We often see large organizations or that have brand guidelines really talking at a high level about their brand, but it doesn't really always close the loop for what the donor communications, fundraising channels need to do. Not as much currently, but that's evolving. Okay, that's good. Anybody else? Yes. Okay, we've got some yes. Anybody else? No, but there is a subdocument that guide the work. That's great. We often provide our clients with what we call brand addendums that take the fundraising channels and what they need, a more personal, individual tone into account. We have comms packs that dictate what we can and can't say. Yes. Okay, good. Do you brief your agencies all together in the same room? Anybody? Not as of yet. No, but love this idea. No. Great. Okay. I mean, each agency, if you are a large organization and have more than one agency, or even medium organizations do, it's a good thing, even if it's a virtual meeting, some together. Good. And you'll hear that the Canadian Cancer Society, media is in the room, production's in the room, the DM, the digital, I think I said media buying, yes, and the mass team. Okay, great. Next question. Do you not integrate because you think integration is too costly? Well, we've got a lot of yeses, but to the earlier questions. Does Stella work with sick kids and heart and stroke? No, we don't work with sick kids Currently, we have worked with them in the past, and not currently working with Heart and Stroke. Not costly, but requires more time and planning. That's true. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Okay, next question. Do you not integrate because you think you need to have everything figured out at the beginning of the process? Again, we had a lot of yes to integration earlier, so I don't know that that's as relevant to this group, but you can see where I'm leading there. Okay, next slide. Just being mindful of the time. So why should you integrate? The postal strike in just before Christmas, if it taught us anything, it's that when one channel goes away, you better have be communicating with your donors and interacting with them in other channels. That's great. Next bullet. The trade wars, we're about to feel some pain coming out of our southern friends, and that can make donors feel less financially secure. Just like the next point, elections, when new government comes in, either here or in the US, that's going to impact the policies that impact all of you. And I know several of you are grappling with that as we speak today. So again, integration gives you that emotional connection to your donors so that they'll stay with you, hopefully, if you're communicating with them in other channels. Overuse of technology can impact donor trust. We talked about this in our last webinar last month, where authenticity is king when it comes to what donors will trust. And it's critically important that they trust you. So we have to be careful when we're integrating, when we're putting anything out into the market, that authenticity remains king, even if we are using AI. And finally, donors are integrated. They are on their phones. They are on transit. They are watching linear TV. A lot of people still are, believe it or not. And they're streaming. They're walking. They're seeing billboards. They are integrated. So we have to be where they are and putting our brand out in a consistent way and asking consistently in the channels that are best suited to a response. Next slide. So let's break it down a little bit. There's brand platform integration, and there is creative concept integration. Thank you, by the way, to Candace, who's driving this presentation. And she can't see any of us, so she's being a real trooper, blindly clicking for us. So let's break it down further. What is brand platform integration? No surprise here. It's your logo, your brand colors, brand fonts, and all the rules for deployment that are in your brand guidelines. The philosophy and personality behind your brand, what your brand stands for, and who it is. When donors think of you, who do they think of? What do they think about you? What's the person they're connecting to in your fundraising channels? Who is that like? And then the emotive public-facing expression of the brand philosophy and personality that acts as an umbrella message for the organization and can live for a year or 5 years or longer. And in the commercial world, that example might be something like Nike, just do it. That is their brand platform. Their advertising and their marketing all live under that umbrella and supports it and respects it and pays it off, regardless of channel. Next, creative concept integration. Think of the creative that sits under that umbrella, a creative campaign that has specific short-term messaging goals and outcomes. A big idea that sits under the umbrella platform and reinforces it. So it should be on brand, that creative concept that lives in all channels, and it should reinforce that good feeling that donors have, regardless of channel, and then respects each channel for the job it's intended to do. So direct mail is direct responsive. It can also be brand building. A print ad tends not to be. A 30-second spot, not responsive, but a 1-minute spot can be. Just think about the channels you're choosing and what you want that channel to do, and then respect it for the job it's intended to do, and it'll reward you. Uses consistent imagery, not the exact same image, and you're going to see examples of that A lot of people think I need to have the exact same image everywhere to integrate. You don't. And as I said, we'll prove that point. Messaging and a unifying campaign line, and you'll see the example, the Canadian Cancer Society example that reinforces this point. The example here is the Apple Think Different campaign. So again, a lot of different images, one slogan, one brand reinforced. The man of the moment. I just watched that movie last night about Bob Dylan. Great performances, not a great movie. And then another example from the same campaign, Jim Henson and Kermit, my favorite Muppet. So that's a perfect example of the brand platform and integration and the campaign integration as well. Style of photography is the same, but doesn't have to be the same imagery. Now, David is going to take you through how they integrate at the Canadian Cancer Society and what they do to get their agencies ready to go. So over to you, David.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Next slide, please, Candace. Thanks for driving the bus. While I have the privilege of speaking with you today, I also wanted to share the spotlight with the Integrated Campaigns team. We're also present in today's webinar. They don't really like to be in the spotlight, but I really want to recognize them and shine the spotlight on them because they play a vital part in leading and managing successful integrated fundraising campaigns here at the Canadian Cancer Society, which you'll also hear me say CCS because it's just in the interest of time, we'll cut it short. So having them in place and also the teams that we collaborate with in our every campaign, like they've been integral to the success of our integrated campaigns. So with the strategic collaboration that with almost every team and program at CCS, our integrated campaigns portfolio raises over $30 million annually while inspiring our community of supporters to give year after year after year. Next slide, please. So today I'm here to share some of the key ingredients for successful campaign integration for the Canadian Cancer Society. And I want to note that, I'll be talking more about more than just the integration of creative and visuals, but also on, focusing more on what has been important for us in developing and implementing an integrated and donor-centric campaign that will generate revenue and efficiently utilize the limited resources that's available, because I think we can all relate to that. So for the Canadian Cancer Society, the following really have proven to be the key ingredients in planning and implementing successful campaigns. We'll go through each in more detail, but really key elements are just having a committed, having the organization committed and aligned to integration, to campaign integration and alignment, establishing clear and defined objectives for your campaign, having clear and concise briefing documents and briefing tools, and really a commitment to a rigid campaign tracking and measurement process. At CCS, we're very fortunate to have a dedicated team that I introduced you to earlier in this presentation of, focused on strategic integration for our mass marketing campaign strategies and tactics. But I do want to reiterate that it's not a one-size-fits-all list. These are what works for CCS based on our current organizational structure, our operating principles, and how our teams work together. But I've also worked in smaller organizations where we were able to still achieve successful campaign integration because various teams have committed to collaborate and work together to achieve a collective goal. So it's great to see that I think majority, if not all, of the attendees today are already integrating, because there are various ways to integrate, but I think these are the key elements that I've talked about or I've listed here. These are the ones that really were, for us, present in the process, regardless of the size of your organization. Next slide, please. So one of the critical elements that we have here at CCS that makes campaign integration successful is really the backing and commitment from the leadership team, just to align strategic efforts across various initiatives for the campaign. Having executive management support really helps reduce, if not entirely remove, silo-related barriers. So we heard Brian show these, although colorful, silo-related barriers are still a challenge for many organizations. So the integration mentality, if you will, really is ingrained in our organizational culture, specifically when it comes to mass campaigns, and really has proven to be invaluable in building and maintaining strong working relationships with so many of our stakeholders, if not every stakeholder that we work with. So without the leadership team's buy-in to it, it'll be very challenging for us to implement successful campaigns and successful integrated campaigns. Next slide, please. Okay, so since we're investing time and resources into every campaign, our team, and not just our integrated campaigns team, our collective stakeholder team ensures that we have clear objective of what it is that we really want to achieve from every campaign. So our starting point is to do a deep dive into data and insights from past campaigns that we then use to guide and direct the goals and strategies for the next one. It's important not just for the success of the campaign. Having clearly defined objectives also sets clear expectations that really lead to a true partnership with our stakeholders. And having shared goals with our stakeholders, they become partners for us and help us navigate through unexpected challenges that come up. So defining campaign objectives really is a step that we take early in the strategic planning process. And once we have that framework of the plan, we go straight into socialization mode where we communicate these objectives with our strategic partners very early in the process, as I mentioned, and often. So, for us, 10 months out from launch, we're already meeting with key stakeholders on big picture objectives and soliciting feedback on their initiatives that they might be running, later in the year that may fit and align into our campaign strategy. So we're already talking about holiday campaign 2025 at this point, which I'm sure many of you might be doing the same thing. So the value in building healthy lead times in the planning process is that it provides a runway, for the subject matter experts to bring their expertise to the campaign. It creates space for the teams to bring innovative ideas and be creative. And it also helps identify earlier on in the process and to help secure the needs for resourcing without needing to scramble for budgets and internal resourcing or data needs, because we've all been there and it's not a fun place to be in. So these alignment huddles kind of really help set the foundation for our team to develop clear and informative briefing tools, which is another key element that we'll be talking about next. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So at this point, you've gotten buy-in from executive management. They're all aligned to run an integrated campaign and to move away from any siloed or channel-based campaigns. And you've already established a clear set of objectives that you want to achieve. So what's next? Well, now it's time to really elaborate and document campaign objectives and the plan in writing through these briefing documents. So, this will be the song sheet, which I'm sure you've heard so many times in terms of the saying of singing from the same song sheet, that our stakeholders and partners really use as reference in guiding the development of their respective deliverables. So at CCS, we develop basically two vital briefing documents that we utilize as we collaborate and gain alignment across the organization. One's the integrated campaign brief, and the other one's the communications brief. So the campaigns brief essentially is a mini business case document that really addresses the why and the what, the who, where, how long, how much, kind of questions of the campaign. It outlines the budget, resourcing needs, strategies and tactics, roles and timelines. And then the communications brief is more of a creative focused document that provides guidance to agencies or internal creative teams, if that's what you have, just to develop the campaign or the content development or branding campaigns and creative. Next slide, please. So based off of that, I want to briefly, a little bit of a dad joke there, briefly go through the differences. Oh, is this thing on? Never mind. Let's move on. Go through the differences between the elements within a campaign and communications brief. So the campaign brief really just details the rationale, the value in running the campaign, having the background or a summary of past results, business challenges that you aim to address in the campaign, and obviously the business objectives that you would have set early on in the planning process. And this document provides details on campaign strategies and tactics, target audience that you're going after, your product offers and KPIs, and again, roles and responsibilities expected from each stakeholder. And because it's an integrated campaign, it'll have to include details of what your sources of revenue are. Is it coming from direct mail? Is it from email? Is it from digital kind of initiatives? Or is it phone? And then setting KPIs for each of these revenue sources. The communications brief, on the other hand, is really derived from the strategic details of the campaign brief, then adapted to focus on details that will be more important for the creative development of the campaign. So details like, what's the communication objective? What's the brand promise? What do we want our audiences to do? Positioning and support statements, your campaign ambassadors and storytellers, if available, and obviously any offer details and calls to action. So from there, the agency partners or internal creative team then use this document to really guide their work and their assignment, if you will, which some agencies and a lot of agencies actually turn into a creative brief that then expands on what your needs are based on the communications brief. Next slide, please. So from our experience, the last key ingredient, if you will, in running a successful and integrated campaign from start to finish is really having the process and the tools in place to track and measure results. It's for us, it's critical for, to monitor cross-channel performances, obviously, but it also really helps make data-driven adjustments mid-campaign. So to share a real-life scenario, our Daffodil Month campaign, which is our largest mass marketing campaign that we run for CCS, once we launched, our team kept track of our campaign metrics, and early or midway through the campaign, we saw how our revenue was really lagging and exhibited softness from previous years or year-to-date revenue results. So this data-driven flag really spurred us to go into mitigation planning mode right away. And we were able to kind of move up some of our key conversion strategies that we were actually holding off as our final push at the end of the phase of the campaign. And by doing so, we saw the revenue really kind of pick up and increase. That kind of helped us meet, or at least get close to the campaign goal in the end. Otherwise, if we were not tracking the results daily and in that kind of level, it would have been too late for us to really pivot and implement any mitigation plans and tactics that we would have come up with. In the interest of time, next slide, please. Just to share some KPIs and metrics that we keep a close eye on. I mean, I bucketed it into two types, like leading and lagging, which I think we're all familiar with. So leading indicators for us really just help anticipate trends and potential impact on final results, and and whether we're on track to meet our targets. So, we look at website traffic, open rates, and click-through rates, impressions, and really getting a sense of whether we're successful in engaging our audience. For lagging indicators, really it's the actual metrics and KPIs that we use to measure for our campaign. And so those are like, what are conversion rates on our donation form, the revenue raised, the cost per acquisition, and donors acquired. But what's important is that these metrics, regardless if you're using both leading and lagging indicators, that really it measures the objectives we've established for the campaign. So it actively monitors these indicators so that, again, it'll guide our decisions whether to maintain, steady as she goes kind of mentality, or if there is a need for mitigation tactics. Okay, next slide, please. So say your organization has aligned that integration is the way to go, which again, seeing from the responses from earlier, it seems like it is, and you've had your defined objectives set, you have the perfect, pristine briefing tools, you have your measurement tools in place. Basically, it's all smooth sailing from here, right? For those already kind of doing integration in their organization, I'm sure you're all shaking your heads right now. Not quite. I spent a good chunk of time talking about how campaign integration is amazing and sets teams and organizations up for success, which it does. It definitely does. It's not perfect though, and integration is not without its challenges. So a little bit of a behind the scenes look. at some of the challenges that we've encountered from our end in leading integrated campaigns. First one is just having different stakeholder priorities, and that's just the reality. Because just because a team has agreed to support and work with you on an integrated campaign really doesn't mean that your priorities are also on the top of their list. So most of the time they aren't. And this is why alignment meetings and objective sharing at very early stages of the strategic planning process is critical. Decision making. At the end of the day, who will make the final call when there are varying opinions and feedback on campaign strategies? And at CCS, really, there's a kind of unspoken, but also sometimes spoken, sometimes yelled at, rule that, or guideline, that the final call is the team or the lead who's accountable for the actual campaign results. So while that's the case, that doesn't mean, so most of the time from a strategic standpoint, it's the integrated campaigns team, but then that doesn't mean we also dismiss every single feedback we receive. It's actually quite the opposite. We listen and take into consideration every feedback, and then assess which ones enhance the campaign or ones that flag risks that may have been a blind spot for us. I also saw somebody respond, integration takes time and effort. It definitely does. It's not something that you set and forget. And being proactive and planning ahead is critical. And lastly, integration opens up new and creative ideas. So it also opens up more opportunities for feedback and comments. So managing and consolidating stakeholder feedback can also be a challenge if you don't have an established review process, if you don't allocate the appropriate window of time in your work back schedules. And our campaigns team and even the teams that we work with really keep and monitor tight work back schedules that acknowledge that there are various stakeholders who will be looking at reviewing an email copy, a landing page, and we'll have different perspectives to take into consideration. But it's also important that we appoint a designated reviewer and filter and compile feedback, and really base it on the alignment to the strategy and the objectives of what we're reviewing. Almost there. Next slide, please. So I'll end there, but before I turn it over to Shelley, here's how I would sum up the value of campaign integration. Single channel tactics, represented here by the legendary Mr. Bean, and get stale pretty quickly, and really sometimes can sound monotonous to a lot of audiences, and in turn can get them easily distracted from the message that we're trying to communicate. So for us at the Canadian Cancer Society, integrated campaigns ensures consistent messaging across various channels and with different donor audiences. It widens our reach, that creates more opportunities for interaction and in turn conversion. It allows for flexibility and nimbleness. I think we've all kind of been significantly impacted by the recent postal strike, especially having it happen during the busiest giving season. So on our end, because we were able to launch an integrated holiday campaign, it allowed our teams to really quickly pivot towards driving our donor base towards online giving and building on the integrated key messages that were leveraged across all our fundraising channels. So while our mail revenue essentially got hit pretty badly, we did see our online revenue spike up and actually helped in exceeding our revenue goals for the campaign, despite this unforeseen disruption. So it allowed our cross-functional teams to quickly, again, pivot. I know we're sick of that word, but yeah, pivot to drive our mail audiences to make online donations and ramp up online donation acquisition. So this really would have been challenging if there was a disconnect with our campaign strategy and creative. With that, I just want to thank you for your time today, and I hope that what I shared today sparked ideas that you could implement or adapt in your organization. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Shelley to talk about creative integration.
Great. Thank you, David. So the first example of integration we want to share is brand platform integration. You heard Brian mention that earlier. And this was using, again, Canadian Cancer Society example. This was a new brand platform that CCS launched in January of 2024. The idea, it takes the society Nothing big gets solved by one person or one organization. To take on cancer, it takes all of us. That's kind of the personality and philosophy behind this new brand platform. And as fundraisers, we need to make sure that we're incorporating that personality and that philosophy in everything we're doing. We'll share just a couple of quick examples of how we did that in our fundraising direct mail. So this was an annual renewal, so it came out right around the time that the brand platform launched. We wanted to have that. It's meant to be kind of a rallying cry, and so we wanted to introduce that in the Johnson box. You'll see that here. Mary Elizabeth, unite with us to transform the lives of people facing cancer. And then we had the Canadian Cancer Society CEO introduce the essence of it, of the new brand platform by saying, to take on something as big and complex as cancer, it will take all of us coming together. Please renew your support. So it's that essence of the brand platform, but still with our fundraising objective, which is getting our house donors to renew. Another example is the Daffodil campaign. You heard David mention it's one of the CCS's biggest fundraising campaigns. And the creative concept was Help Hope Bloom. But we wanted to also incorporate the brand platform, which was fairly new at this point. So we've put those together with it. It takes all of us to help hope bloom. Okay, now on to, oh, no, we've got one more example. No, we don't. It's creative concept integration. It's a creative concept integration. So we want to spend a little bit more time on this using CCS holiday campaign as an example. And David talked about this, and this is really important. CCS does for their big campaigns like this, the holiday integrated campaign, does a big kickoff meeting with all the stakeholders and all the partners. So we get briefed together. So we're all on the same page. We all understand what CCS's vision is, what their objectives are. We're all at the same starting point. Then one of their partners, Juliet, who does their mass and brand advertising, was tasked with going away to come up with a campaign theme. You heard Brian talk about, unifying theme or the big idea. And this was the campaign theme for our holiday campaign. Every moment is a gift. So as we said, they engaged their mass agency, and then every moment is a gift really became that connective thread for a cohesive and distinct and compelling integrated campaign for CCS. ST's role and that of Stella, our digital fundraising division, we created the direct mail, the emails, and the website creative. And being true to our channel, we wanted to talk and demonstrate about donor impact and really inspire donations through emotive storytelling. Next slide. This is the campaign kind of in a nutshell. Every moment is a gift, and the idea behind it is during the holidays, nothing matters more than quality time spent together for those facing cancer. And I wanted to stop just here for a sec. This was what was shared with us early on. So Julia went and created the campaign theme, and then there was an all-agency stakeholder meeting again, where this was shared with us. So we're kept in the loop at every stage. So early on, this is basically what was shared with us. It's not the final none of the final assets were ready. None of the online videos or social ads or anything else was fully created at this point. Here's the essence of our idea, our theme for our holiday campaign. And what this also showed us, not only the philosophy, but how we were all to use every moment as a gift in the yellow and the uppercase, and also the type of imagery that would be part of the campaign, sharing these special moments between people, and even kind of the tone has a kind of a dark into lightness kind of tone. So that was all sort of shared and discussed right up front, so that some of the agency partners like ourselves who need for direct mail that longer lead time, we could hit the ground running using this as our launching off point. Next slide. Throughout the campaign, as different elements were developed and became available, they were shared with us. There was a constant sharing. And this is a good example. So in addition to photos showing kind of special moments between people, this was a campaign motif that would help connect everything together. And it's that sort of, it gives a holiday feel with that sort of bluey, wintry kind of coloration and what we came to be calling the twinkly lights effect. And this was a really wonderful campaign element that was going to help ensure that everything everybody's doing had a same sort of look and feel. And you'll see that on some of the next slides. So this is the wave 1 direct mail. We did 3 waves of direct mail. This is wave 1. And you can see our campaign theme, every moment is a gift, but then also being true to fundraising, help give more of them. That's what we want people to do. Our storyteller and signatory for wave one was Marie Noel, a cancer survivor. And this photo really captures nicely a special moment between her and her friends. And then we also have how your donation makes a difference on the back, and there were some holiday cards included. I wanted to show you next slide where we started from. So we didn't magically happen upon this wonderful photo of Marie Noel in this twinkly lights background. We had a wonderful photo of her sharing a special moment with her friends, but they were at an event. So to be true to the campaign, the mood and the feel and a holiday aspect of it, we changed the background into that, using that motif that was shared with us of the twinkly lights and the magical sort of wintry moments. We even changed Marie Noel's scarf to be blue, so it was more of a holiday kind of a feel. Next slide. Carried this through to all the elements. This is the letterhead on the left where we brought in that sort of twinkly light effect on the yellow masthead for CCS. And I mentioned the holiday cards were inside, and we were on theme with those as well, sharing special moments with our holiday cards, these two children sharing a special moment with the twinkly lights in the background. And the message on theme as well, enjoy precious moments this holiday season. So everything was on theme. Next slide. This is a digital example. As we said, we worked on digital, and this was the launch. The digital was in 3 phases, and this was the launch. Every moment is a gift. Help give more of them, and then how donate to fund life-saving research. And we have a moment between people and sparkly lights, twinkly lights. Next is some emails. There's a series. Again, the emails were over 3 waves, and there was multiple emails in each series. These are just 2 examples from the first wave. You can see on the left, we brought Marie Noel into our email. So there was that connection to the direct mail. We've got a different image of her while she was undergoing treatment. And we just wanted to share too that although we used our theme, every moment is a gift, quite often, you'll see it on the second email to the right. We also sometimes brought it in using other techniques like quotes. So this quote from Marie Noel brings in that theme. Surviving cancer made me appreciate that every moment is a gift. So they're mixing it up. So there's a freshness to each piece. The next slide. Further along in our campaign development, Juliet, CCS's mass agency, did a photo shoot and did online video shoots. And those assets were shared with all the agency partners, including ourselves, to incorporate where it made sense into the campaign. So there was always some consistency happening. And the next couple of frames show the online videos.
I think we're missing music, but
yeah, and there was music, but it's not coming through, but it's just a lovely music track. So this shows some of the social ads. So again, you can see a lot of the twinkly light effects, the type treatment that was consistent, and that consistent messaging. So these assets were shared with us basically while we were ready to develop our wave 2. So we'll go on to that. So our wave 2 of the direct mail, we weren't able to use those assets in this mailer because our storyteller and signatory was a Canadian Cancer Society funded cancer researcher. So it didn't really coordinate in the direct mail package. We know that donors are very motivated by cancer research. So it's a very effective tool that we use, is using cancer researchers sometimes to write to our donors. But we wanted to ensure there was still that integration. So you'll see his quote is over that holiday twinkly light background. So that's a connective element. And then on the other side of the OE, we brought in the twinkly light effect into the yellow. We have our theme, every moment is a gift, help give more of them, and our call to action. And then some subtle little tie-in was our custom indicia, and that's an image that does show a special moment between people. And it also was one of the holiday cards in the first wave. So there was a connection there as well. Next slide. We were able to bring in some of the assets from Juliet into digital. So Wave 2 Digital focused on Giving Tuesday, and a big aspect of Giving Tuesday is gift match. And even though we led with that from a messaging point of view, our visual was from the Juliet's online video. So there was a connection there with what was happening in market and what's happening here on the website. We did similarly with the emails. Again, there was a series of emails in this second wave. The left one kind of introduces what Giving Tuesday is all about. It's an image from the photo shoot and talking about making more moments possible this giving season. And again, that's an example of instead of literally every moment is a gift, we brought in that kind of theme in a slightly different way. Then we get into our specific Giving Tuesday donation emails, which had a gift match, a visual that represents a special moment with twinkly lights. And embedded in that email was a quote from our researcher so that there was a connection to Wave 2 DM that was in market at the same time. Next slide. Wave 3 DM had a different signatory and storyteller. It was Sarah Oates, who's also a cancer survivor. And here she is in her matching PJs with her grown kids. And there's even lights in the background that were actually part of the photo. So that was lovely. And again, we brought in our theme through a quote from Sarah, because there's been a lot of materials now out there with every moment is a gift. So to bring a little freshness to it, she says, since surviving cancer, every moment I get to spend with my kids is a gift. So it's just a fresh kind of take on that. And we again have the twinkly lights in the yellow for consistency through all waves. And we have our lovely little custom indicia as well. So Wave 3 really focused more on year end, including our digital. And this actually is just a still shot from our animated video from the CCS website that used an actual clip from the online video as part of this animation and introducing the year-end gift match. And next is the emails. Again, there was a number of emails within phase 3, but the focus was on year end. On the left, you can see it was a photo from Juliet's photo shoot. The second one is an example of an image that we brought in. And we also brought in a back reference to Marina Well from our first wave of DM. We have a pull quote from her so that's a connection to wave 1 and the whole thing. It kind of finishes the whole loop of the creative. And finally, this is a snapshot of a variety of the campaign elements. And I just want to kind of point out two things with this. One is I think you can see how it all looks like it really goes together, and yet it's not cloned, it's not an exact copy everywhere. There's fresh sort of elements, and yet it still feels very cohesive. And I think the other key takeaway is when you look at this and you see how everything really works together, not only were different creative team members involved in some of these cases, but also different agencies were involved. And I think when you look at this, you wouldn't get that sense. And a big part of that is just ensuring we're working together right from the get-go. And that.
Over to you, Candace. We can't hear you. There might be an issue with your sound.
Oh, can people hear me now? Okay. Yep. Wonderful. I think maybe I was muted by someone, so which is fine. So I know that we have about 5 minutes left.
I've given everybody a heads up that we might go over, and that hopefully they'll stick around, but that it's recorded. So keep going, and okay. Hopefully folks can hang out.
Yeah. So what I can do is I can toboggan through some of these slides. Let's give this a go. I had to, sorry guys, I had to get out of that in order to unmute myself. Okay, so I'll toboggan through these, like I said. So these are sort of what it's like to do integration from the agency side and also specifically from the account team side. So this can either be if you're working in an agency, here's what it's like, or if you're working at one of on the client side, maybe give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain into the secret sauce of what goes on. So before we start anything, we've got to be sure that we're aligned on communication, that we are being collaborative and respectful of each other, that we are supremely organized. And if you are on the agency side, be sure you know your client. Be sure that you understand the brand. Be sure that you understand people's preferences. Be sure you understand the way that people like things to be rooted and what are key elements that are important. All of that lays a really great runway. Also, and David has touched on this and Shelley touched on this, but we have to make sure that we're communicating with each other and that we have key touch points integrated into our work. We have to be sure that we're talking with their client. We have to be sure that we're talking to our partner agencies and that we have good communication with them. Our internal teams, sometimes you have sub teams within a sub team within a sub team. Everyone within those groups has to be communicating with each other and sharing information. What are the opportunities for us to do this? Well, it's in the communications briefing, which Shelley spoke to and David spoke to, where all the agencies are in the room. There's the creative brief document, and there's the creative briefing itself with whatever your specific team or sub team may be. Within the rounds of feedback, and also be sure that you're communicating anytime you need clarity on something. Don't guess. Anytime you've heard an important piece of information, maybe you need to share it with people and don't just keep it to yourself. And also the need to share assets. Did you get an asset? So Shelley was talking before about how we got a photograph from Juliet, and that was really great to see so that we could be further inspired with the work that we were doing. Within all of those roles of communication, identify the communication champion and their role and responsibility. David, one of those champions might be how David identified a designated reviewer. So know who your designated people are to do specific tasks. We are going to run through about 6 stages of development here. So the creative brief document, if it's not in the brief, it won't be in the creative. We've got to make sure that that brief covers theme, that we have clear objective by channel. Those could be different in different channels. We know all of the deliverables and the timing by those channels. Direct mail is not in the same timeline as DM, which is not necessarily in the same timeline as the digital assets or online assets. Know the full scope of work. What am I saying when I say scope of work? How's that different than a deliverable? Well, within the scope of work, do you know who all the different storytellers are for different time periods? Do you have to generate work in multiple languages? And think about that as you're working through the creative. Oh, a French translation is going to be about 25% more words. So think about that. Is there a viable translation that works? Know all your formats and versioning. Know the mandatories and considerations of what we have to do, and ensure stakeholder agreement. Everyone singing from that same songbook, which should all be outlined within the creative brief. Now, creative development kind of starts, we've got an approved brief, and then the sub team, we put a little creative brief together and we'll have a meeting and go over it. The briefing is an opportunity for everyone within that room to get clarity and to collaborate. Are there questions about what we need to do? We worked with the holiday campaign with an integrated creative brief. That means the brief was very substantial and it covered all of the elements within direct mail and it covered all of our digital elements. In fact, that brief circulated a few times on different timelines and on different stakeholders. However, all of the work was outlined within it that we were responsible for. As you're developing, you're not just like Shelley has shown you, here is the piece of mail we sent out. Here is the email that we sent out. But in a lot of these cases, we actually presented a range of creative options for those deliverables. And what you're seeing as the final product, it went through several options and iterations. You also have to be sure that we have the continuity between channel assets and not cloning, as Shelley mentioned. Direct mail, social, email, etc. They all have to look like they're from the same farm, shall we say. We also have to be sure that all of these assets that we're developing articulate the offers by channel. They could be different. Is the match offer in direct mail different than the match offer in email? You've got to know all of that. And while we talk about all these technicalities and versionings and all of that, don't lose the emotion, particularly in anything where we have a storyteller or a storyteller voice, or where there's a personal experience there. Don't lose the emotion and the human being within all the technical elements. And sometimes with these campaigns, there is specific iconography and specific photography. Maybe there's a specific logo that's developed for that campaign. That's something that you'll need to be sure that you ask for, that you have, and maybe you need to connect with another champion to make sure that you get those materials. There you go, champion. Then there's internal review as initial assets and options are created. So before the client ever sees it, we look at materials against the review, against the brief, to be sure that it is what the client says that they need. And sort of the account team acts as the connective tissue between the creative teams and the client teams. We have to ensure that copy and imagery are on theme, on brand, and on brief. And also, when we're looking at a creative asset, we're sure to look at it. We say, okay, let's switch mindset. There's my immediate reaction to it. But now let me look at it from the point of view of the target audience. What might the target audience think about whatever has been developed? And then, of course, always thinking about it. Now, what if I put myself in the mindset of David Basco? Will he think about what we're producing here? Both of those, I think, are really important because you could catch nuances in the creative that you may not otherwise if you don't shift your mindset. Of course, cross-reference developed work. We looked at those photos. We see some social ads. Does everything look like it's of a piece? So some of that cross-referencing can be in internally developed channels, and some of it can be with our partner channels or with a partner agency. And be sure that we're looking at it and saying, does this creative meet the campaign objectives? Avoid NASCAR. This is also something that's important at this stage, but I would also say it's really important at the briefing stage. What I'm trying to say here is we usually want the recipient of the creative to engage in a particular action. Are we on the creative losing focus? Make sure that it's really defined and we're not asking the recipient to do too many things or consider too many outcomes. We want it to be focused and directed at those campaign objectives. So then we get to the client presentation, and you want to make sure that you set the presentation up for success. What we did was we presented, as I believe Shelley mentioned, we had 19 emails for holiday. We broke those up, and we also had a corresponding other digital deliverables that went alongside those 19 emails. We broke it up into 3 phases. What that facilitated is we could generate some work up front, go through those options, present it to the client, and get feedback to see what were the likes and what were the bumps in the road, so that when we were developing the subsequent 10 emails, we had now feedback. We knew what the likes were. We weren't developing 19 of them and then editing 19 of them. Make sure that whenever you deliver creative, you have it formatted and annotated for distribution. Oftentimes there's many champions or there's many layers of approval that something has to go through. Make sure that your creative is marked up so that if someone receives the creative and they did not have the benefit of being in the presentation where we speak about the rationale for certain choices, that they can understand it. Or the champion then has a little twig in their brain to go, oh yeah, make sure that I mention that this is why we were using, let's say, reverse window envelope. Can you show work that this will follow? So maybe the work that you're about to show is within a sequence. Can you also, before you show the work, show what comes before it so that you're illustrating continuity. And as I mentioned before, and I want this is a key element here, you've got to be sure that you're walking through the rationale for the choices that you made to the client. You've got to talk the client through the choices that you've made from the perspective of, here's what we think the audience will think. Here's the emotion we're trying to capture. Here is where we're on objective and on theme. Here is where we've looked at it against the brief and other previously approved campaign materials. And this is why we think these are some of the real things we have to consider as we make these choices. So client feedback and review. Again, back to those original principles of communication and collaboration. Here's something that is sort of maybe a request or a nice to have, is when we receive feedback from a client or someone we're doing work for, we love feedback articulated as a problem to solve. I also totally understand sometimes there is something very prescriptive. No, the logo has to be this way, but sometimes if you articulate the problem to us, we can come up with the creative solutions for you, or at least another option to consider. Something that is also really hugely helpful is consolidated feedback and direction as to where we want to go with whatever the edits will be. I think we've all gone through a time where we've seen a copy deck marked up with lots of commentary, but not necessarily any decisions on things. I will say, if you're doing 19 emails, you need a clear system for identifying rounds of changes. So using that example, we had 3 to 5 rounds of changes for each of those emails on the client side, but that doesn't count the 2 to 3 more rounds sometimes we have internally. You really have to stay organized to stay on top of the amount of work that can come through. Check the edits, then check those edits again before you pass anything back. Make sure you've captured them all. Make sure that all of the edits are aligned with objectives. We have seen cases where we'll get edits back, but the edits haven't necessarily taken in mind some of the objectives or maybe some of the language we've been previously told to stay away from. So sometimes that's when partners on all sides need to be open to fair critique and pushback. So, and again, you need to have a rationale for that. Perhaps you're like, well, this feels like it's a little bit off of the theme of every moment is a gift. So how can we get ourselves aligned to that? So then you deliver the work, detailed system to track all those deliverables. Then we'll do a last round of internal review before we deliver anything to a client on our teams. The account teams will take a look. We'll have our production team take a look. And as appropriate, we'll leverage an external proofreader. Sometimes you've looked at a document many, many, many times and you need a fresh eye to look at something. Be sure, collaborate, share that final work product with client and other suppliers and other partner agencies. Help each other out. Be sure if something is uploaded that you've confirmed receipt. And be sure to get samples of everything. One other thing I will say too is it's really good to confirm receipt and get samples and make sure that all of the deliverables have been there. Not only because you might miss something, but sometimes that's the point at which a client says, oh, we forgot to add, we needed something in another format. Oh, this is not the correct sizing we needed. It's shifted since we briefed. So it's a good opportunity to make sure that everything is workable on the other side. So I want to say this is stay tuned. We've got more great webinars coming up, a book launch in March. Please be sure that you sign up for our newsletter. Just wanted to get that quick plug in before I talk about some of our key takeaways from today. So here are some of the do and don'ts from today. Do be where your donors are and give them the opportunity to respond in the channel of their choice. Don't feel the need to have all the assets at the beginning of the process for each discipline to get started. And we've shown you a few examples of that. Do protect yourself from sector disruptions that are out of your control. We've all been through those, and we're about to go through some of those. Here are things to commit to. Commit to organizational buy-in. I think you've heard all of us echo this. Define campaign objectives, clear briefs for each discipline, tracking and measuring campaigns, and applying the lessons that we learn from this tracking and measuring. And that could be at the end. And as David said, that could be a mid-campaign pivot. So if anyone is still here, we've got some time for some questions. We can open up the floor. And in case you can't stay, I just wanted to say if you had any more questions, feel free to reach out to Brian or myself. So do we have any questions?
Great. Well, we held on to almost everybody. Had a few people drop off. Thank you for sticking around. A topic like integration is so all-encompassing. There's a lot to pack in. And so we're sorry for going 12 minutes over, but do pipe in if anybody has a question or a comment. We'll wait a couple more minutes. Nope, everybody's quiet. So, oh, wait a minute. Does ST use any project management software with their clients? Candace, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. At this point, we do not use a specific piece of project management software. That said, we do have several internal tools that we've developed. And I will say one of the great things about working here at ST is we really do take a boutique approach to each client. We really do look at the amount of deliverables that are needed. We really do look at these stakeholders and what a reasonable turnaround time for each, not only channel, but each champion lane that they have to be, layers of approval. So we kind of develop the timelines on a per campaign basis. That said, we're always continually exploring project software. The catch for us has been we have yet to find the project software that is as nuanced as the work that we do. So there we've always hit a snag. So we've tested several, we've tried several, but we have found that none of them have been as effective as that boutique approach so far, but we're open to something. We're so far.
Anybody else? Thanks for the question, Baz. Excellent, thanks. Okay, well, if no, oh, wait. No, I have to click that done. Okay, so it doesn't look like there are any other questions. Candace, if you want to put that slide with our email addresses back up. We have recorded this, so if anybody does want a version of this for your team back home or yourselves, you can just email me or Candace and we'll get that to you next week. Other than that, good luck integrating, and thanks for joining us. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Carolina, I think